Hey everybody, Josh Sierraton, a World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen. And Greece is one of the most beautiful countries in the world, one of the most incredible histories, one of the longest banking histories, and interestingly enough, one of the worst histories when it comes to economics, when it comes to banking. And we saw that a few years ago, and they are basically stomped down into the dust at this point. As this,
Well, yeah, just to interrupt you, Josh, Greece were the first one to actually invent debasement of currency and democracy, which is failing.
yeah, absolutely. Anyway, so
fact.
yeah, two wolves and a sheep deciding what to have for dinner. But anyway, going into this article by Deutsche Welle, Greek parliament approves bailout reforms as thousands protest. And as it goes into, Greek parliamentarians on Monday voted in favor of draft legislation containing a series of fiscal, energy, and labor reforms that international lenders have prescribed as conditions for receiving further bailout money. A majority in the 300-seat parliament in Athens voted to approve the legislation. More than 6,000 demonstrators gathered outside the building during deliberations ahead of the vote to protest against the measures, which, among other things, envisage stricter criteria for holding strikes. The proposed reforms also triggered a 24-hour strike that ended Monday. And, another one of the issues with some of the strikes is that they're pro-government and they want the government to fix the problems of government and banks, which is kind of like a never-ending circle. It's a perpetual, Hegelian dialectic of problem, reaction, solution.
What they didn't understand in Greece was that the actual, when I went and looked at the pre-crisis numbers, the government the government expenditure to GDP, it was over 53%, and that is when it's over 50%. That means that the government is bigger than the private sector it relies on for income.
Yeah,
and that's the collapse that
and
happens.
There's just such a massive amount of debt, such a massive amount of puppet strings from like the EU, etc. Like this push to create a global, impoverished system through the banking control, the debt slavery. If you shove someone down a bottomless pit of debt, they are forced to ask for a ladder up from the government or the banking system, and that puts them in perfect servitude. A populace in debt and a populace in fear is a populace in servitude. John, you've written about this in your book, The End of Freedom, How Our Monetary System Enslaves Us. Now, the charts are slightly outdated at this point, going back to 2011. It's really hard to find information, but can you go into this?
Yeah, no, I'm going to go into it by first mentioning, how Greece got into problem in the first place. Massive government accumulating massive amounts of debt. And what's funny about this debt, it have been borrowed to Greece as they were, first of all, a flawed state. I think it was Goldman Sachs back in the day that actually managed to get Greece into the European Union in the first place.
Any state is a flawed state.
Yeah, exactly. Now, what was interesting is with Greece, there were such an unsustainable states, and you see the guys here with red flags. That's the communists, of course, out there, fighting against the government that they want to implement in the first place.
Yeah, so that's great. It's statism versus statism. When the problem of in the very beginning is statism, It's just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, well, Greece is bankrupt. That's the number one thing. Like, they're talking about these bailouts. You gotta understand, Greece has been bankrupt ever since the first bailout in, I think, 2010. And that's when we saw the start of this whole bankruptcy that they've been through all along. And they're using these bailout reforms in order to put austerity on the people that they enslaved in the first place. And now they're out there yelling, wanting reform. And meanwhile, they were the ones become the slave of the government in the first place, Josh. They are now, the slaves. And they talk about all these countries that hold a debt that... of course, is getting borrowed and bailed out to the Greek government. And who's holding it? It's, of course, France, Germany, the U.S., and Cyprus, and others that are holding this. They say that's the countries that hold it, but when you go and look at the actual stats, which I have in my book here on page 203, you see that Alpha Bank, which is a Greek bank, we looked up that, has the biggest portion of the debt in 2011 second quarter. Mm-hmm. It was 2.22%. And then, of course, there was banks from Greece that held a tremendous amount of Greek debt. And also Spanish and French and German banks. They're the ones that holds the most amount of debt that they actually borrowed. So banks like Commerzbank, Deutsche Bank, Societe Generale, Bank of Cyprus, Dexia, BNP Paribas, all these banks are on the hook for all this debt. So that's why they're getting bailed out in the first place. So these banks are not going bankrupt, because that's what would happen if Greece actually eventually would do what it's supposed to, go completely bankrupt on its debt.
And look at who's doing the bailing out: the IMF, the Eurogroup, the ECB, the usual predators.
Usual predators, exactly.
Absolutely, just looking for scraps of meat and to use people's vulnerability in impoverished situations to kind of gain more debt from them. And it's really quite sad, because we've gone over this a few times. This is total deja vu all over again, folks, and it's going to keep happening over and over and over. And the end situation that people have to, or the end conclusion that people have to come down to, is self-sustainability and self-responsibility, because this is going to happen in many more countries. It's only the beginning. All fiat currency eventually reverts to its intrinsic value of zero. It always has, it always will, going back to 1024 AD in China. And the combination of central bankers, bail-ins, bailouts, just the destruction of currency, the manipulation of markets, the regulatory factors, the taxation burdens, everything colliding at the same time, mixed with war and all that kind of infighting, is exactly how you get an entire society into complete subservience.
Well, the Greeks should know better. They've been through hyperinflation in the late 40s. They were through, of course, the devaluation of their currency into the Eurozone. So they've been seeing this system, how it's been, using them and stealing all their money. Meanwhile, they're in this dream of believing that the government is still gonna, take over. Well, you see Tsipras there, and that's the president there. He loves government. He's a borderline communist. So of course they're gonna just want more and more control of the government. And you're gonna see, unfortunately, the beautiful country of Greece that I've been able to travel to myself, and I really love it on the islands especially, is going to get sold out to corporate interests, which it has, and they're going to sell off everything that they have, and after that they're going to be run by a communist government.
Yeah, isn't it interesting that so many of the communists are like down with all these corporations, up with government, when the government is creating the giant monopolies in the first place in the corporate sector? It's just absolutely insane. People, come on, let's snap out of this. I was just talking with the woman that cuts my hair, one of the women that cuts my hair recently, and she's from Greece, and she said, well, everything seems to be getting better, and that was just about a week ago. Look, this isn't getting better. This is continuing to escalate and get worse all the time. And it's about time that people look towards self-sustainability, self-responsibility, the hallmark of freedom itself. Food, water, shelter, self-defense. You're not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block. Of course, tangible assets, gold, silver, looking into decentralized assets, Bitcoin, other things. Be careful with the cryptocurrencies lately. They're very unstable. But just going into that more, I mean, you have to look out for yourself and understand. Don't trust politics. Don't trust bankers. They only want your subservience, and that is what they will get if you continuously keep perpetuating the problem by going back to the guys that create the problem in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. That's the bottom line. It's Greek is bankrupt. There's no way back, and it's a time. If they were self-sufficient, Josh, they wouldn't be out there in the streets yelling at all. They'd be just happy that the government failed.
Yeah, and take over as individuals. That's a key. So thanks for going into this with us, John, and we will be back with you with much more. Make sure to check out my new weekly show every Saturday on We Are Change on YouTube, where I talk about cryptocurrencies and altcoins, etc. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdsson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth,
be the change.
Like what you see here at WHAM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so overwhelmingly demonetized and censored by YouTube as the Anti-Defamation League comes in and flags all of our content as hate speech. You can also find me at Josh Sigurdsson at Steemit.com. That's Steemit.com, the future of social media, where you get paid in the upvote of your post via Steem, the cryptocurrency. You can also find our Bitcoin address in the description and the comments below, as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And don't forget to come on down to Anarchapulco in Acapulco, Mexico in February, one of the best events of the year, and you can save money on your tickets by typing in promo code WHAM. That's WAM. We'll leave the link below for you, and until next time, don't forget to subscribe. This is Josh Sigurdsson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
Bye.